Okay, here we are resuming at chapter 13, Renee, Tripe Etampes. A small, pretty blonde army nurse gave me a direction and asked how I was doing. It was then I read in the Stars and Stripes for the first time that the Allies were in a life and death struggle with the Germans in what was being called the Battle of the Bulge. The small map that was illustrated was most interesting, as many of the places mentioned were familiar to me. So when you got a copy of that Stars and Stripes, when you're looking at the map that was illustrated in that magazine.
Well, we didn't know where we were before.
But that's exactly where you were.
Yeah.
It was all familiar.
Yeah, it was good information. We didn't have that.
Some of the other men in the ward were jovial, almost to the point of bragging to the nurses about their combat exploits. I found out as I listened to them that's the ones doing the most talking and bragging were the rear echelon, artillery quartermasters or ordnance. So you're laying in a hospital in Paris, and a couple of the guys are bragging and talking about their experience, and they're probably the ones that didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That's true. That's true. Human nature.
Some of the other men in the ward, the airborne and infantry soldiers, were not doing much talking, but were just lying there trying to collect their emotions and wondering when they would be going back up. I too thought of the prospect.
Then when Pat wanted to shoot that soldier, he said, "I'm nervous, so you got to get me out of here."
Yeah.
He took his rifle. The two nurses grabbed him and took him out of the ward.
Unbelievable.
Talked to patients.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, sir, I'm tired. I'm a nervous wreck. He says, "I got to go home, sir." And the Patton said, "Well, he's so he wanted to shoot her because the pistol wanted to shoot." The two nurses grabbed the kid and ran him off.
Oh, wow. That was an incident. That was very remarkable. I, too, thought of the prospect. I knew that they would not keep us here too long, but turn us around quickly as possible. So they're trying to get you back on your feet as quickly as possible to send you back out.
Oh, yeah. I went out with bandages on it.
You went out with bandages on?
Yeah.
Was your arm still numb when you went out?
Oh, yeah. They were short of people.
What?
They were short of people.
There was always a quick turnaround in the hospital wards. New arrivals came in almost every day, and others were shipped out to other hospitals or replacement centers to start their journey back to the front. I thought I'd be in a position very shortly, and I could feel myself getting stronger each passing day. I did not relish going back. I was in the 194th General Hospital, the Boulevard Marat, near Paint Saint Cloud. We were classified each day by our ward surgeon according to the process and progress of our wounds we had made. Patients in Class 1 would go back to duty immediately. Class 2 were assigned to Convalescent Hospital on the continent. Class 3 patients to a general hospital in England. In Class 4 cases, which required a minimum of 6 months treatment, were transported to a zone of the interior United States. I was classified as Class 2. So a Class 2 patient, they were assigned to a convalescent hospital on the continent.
The what?
Class 2, you were classified as a Class 2 as your hospital classifications, which meant you would stay right there in Paris. They're not shipping you to the States.
No.
The first day at the hospital, my wounds were examined in the operating room, followed several days later by suturing. 10 days later, the sutures were removed, preceded by the continuation of the penicillin interjection. In the 10-day interview, I went back to the operating room twice, not counting the initial examination. I went back to relieve the pinched nerve in my arm and remove more shrapnel from the fatty tissue of the leg. The orthopedic surgeon advised me that he had let a piece of shrapnel in the fatty tissue of my leg due to the position and depth. He also reiterated that another inch I would have lost my manliness. The numbness in the arm and hand was relieved, and I never experienced any after that. The numbness in my hand and arm were relieved, and I never experienced any after that. That's good news. I was able to walk the second week, although weakly at first, and decided to limp. After the second week, we were afforded afternoon passes to Paris. I did a sightseeing the usual places, the Arc de Triomphe, Cathedral of Notre Dame, Eiffel Tower, and the U.S. Military Cemetery. I went mostly alone, and most of the tours were with a sightseeing group and a native guide. I was back at the hospital by 1700 hours for sign-in. I followed the Stars and Stripes keenly for the news of the front and of my division. There were little to tell of my division, only that they were committed to combat several days before Christmas. The paper was full of Allies pursuing a vigorous offensive that retook Würzfeld, Krunkert, Rockhurst, and Walchenschlad, eventually carrying them to the vital Rue River dams and subsequently to the Rhine River. I was recuperating as expected with no side effects, but still on medication and penicillin injections. I still walk with a decided limp, but I can feel myself getting stronger. The day beginning to drag and the clamor of Paris just did not appeal to me. I was thankful for the respite from the war, but I felt I needed something more to occupy myself with besides the trips to Paris and wandering about the hospital grounds. I found a little park just outside the entrance of the hospital. I would go frequently and watch the young boys sail their boats in a small lake in the center of the park.
I don't know.
What?
I heard it too. I don't know what it was.
I thought someone hit me.
No.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
I don't see no one there.
Huh?
It's probably your microphone.
I don't see no one
It's
behind
just
you.
your microphone pinched on you.
Huh?
Your microphone.
Where did it feel like someone hit you?
Huh?
You said you felt like someone hit you. Where did they hit you?
No, I didn't say they hit me. I thought they walked by me. They bumped me or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Could be the microphone. On that day, the boys came up to me and wanted something of his sailboat adjusted and untangled. It was unlooped string that controlled one of the sails. It was a simple problem that anyone could have fixed, but he was overjoyed at the success in correcting the problem. He ran back and told his companions. They all toured toward me and bowed graciously. I was touched by their gratitude and waved back. All the while I was adjusting the string on the sail, the young boys, there was a young woman watching and smiling as I worked on the sail.
Were you in uniform, John?
Huh?
Were you in uniform when you were at the park? Were you wearing your
Yeah,
uniform?
yeah.
Okay.
So
That's the only
no,
clothes I had.
Yeah.
okay. I was touched by their gratitude and waved back to them. All the while I was adjusting the string on the sail for the young boys, the young woman watching and smiling as I worked on the sail. She came forward in motion if she could sit down on the bench. I nodded and she sat down. She spoke some English and I inquired from the hospital, from the park. I nodded yes and she smiled. For a moment there was no further communication, but we just sat there and watched and listened to the boys with their sailboats. Every now and then I would steal a glance in her direction. She had crossed her legs and her skirt was a little above her knees, accentuating her beautiful formed legs. She was tall, slender build, and from what I could observe, a beautiful figure of a woman. She had dark, deep black hair, which touched her shoulders and her mouth, and a well-formed and alluring. Her nose was in the right proportion as to the rest of her face. Her eyes were dark and penetrating, which gave her a certain warmth and cordiality. When she spoke, her mouth... Okay. Look over there.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Come on over, Claire.
Back there.
Come on over, Claire.
I thought I could sneak in and out without calling.
She needs help.
Yeah, she's fine.
She needs help.
I know. Come on in.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I used to walk around.
Yeah, just go ahead. Go ahead and have a seat.
The seat's reserved for you, Claire.
Yeah, there's your seat. Take your pick.
Okay. I'll give you a brief update. John Jekovich is in a hospital in Paris and is becoming well enough where he can go out a few hours a day, and he's sitting in the park.
Old folks home.
No, you weren't in the old folks home at 1918. Her eyes were dark and penetrating, which gave out a certain warmth and cordiality. When she spoke, her mouth would form in a sensual and vivacious pattern of words and sound. Her mannerisms were reserved but directed, and her demeanor suggested breadth of character and social standing. I liked her from the beginning, and I got to know her better. It only reinforced my initial impression. We watched for the boys with their sailboats, and every now and then remark about something they were doing or saying. She would translate into English what they're saying and as gestured and pointed. I saw that her hands were well shaped and her fingers were long and slender with well manicured nails. I felt at ease and comfortable talking with her, and I got the sense that she was enjoying my company also. Just then the boys collected their boats, waved goodbye to us, and disappeared behind a turn in the lake. All of a sudden, everything became very quiet. Our centerpiece of conversation was gone, and we were left to ourselves. We smiled at each other, for no other reason than to break the silence. I asked her what her name was. At first she did not understand, but I pressed on by gesturing and saying my name while pointing to myself. She finally understood and smiled at the great symmetry of her mouth and lips. The silence was broken, and we both enjoyed the pleasantry in discovering each other's name. After much sparkling, sagacious drollery, I found out her name. It was Renee Thomas. A beautiful name, I thought. We sat for a while longer, laughing and talking about little inconsequential topics, both enjoying our conversation and each other. As the sun started to go down, she stated she had to go, and we both got up from the bench. As she stood next to me, I noticed she was a bit shorter than I. Nevertheless, a stunning figure of grace and charm. As we started to walk, I asked her if she'd be here tomorrow, as I would like to see her again. She smiled in a delightful smile, which was so captivating. She blushed a little, fingering both of her hands. She stopped walking and turned toward me. I would see you here tomorrow, if I may, I blurted out and looked directly at her. She gestured goodbye with one hand, turned and started to walk away. A few steps away, She turned, nodded her head as to say yes, smiled, and briskly walked away. I was delighted at my good fortune, and moreover, I was certain I would be here tomorrow. I walked past the hospital, almost limp-free, cheered by the turn of events, and anticipating what the next few days would bring. I suddenly realized that I was starving and the life was not so bad after all. We were requested to use the mess hall as part of our rehabilitation program. I did not object at all. I got rather tiresome and boring having the meals from a bed tray sitting up in your bed. I wanted to move as much as possible, and eating the mess hall helped out a lot. For dinner we had fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and several vegetables. For dessert we had chocolate cakes and, of course, hot steaming coffee. It was a marvel and tribute to American ingenuity and manufacturing skill to be engaged in an all-out war and still have time and space for a chocolate cake. Was the chocolate cake good?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Two layer.
Two layer? Wow. Two layer. Wow. The mess hall was a former private school cafeteria situated on the first floor with administrative offices, docks for incoming patients. It was clean, spacious room with natural light. There were many individual tables with chairs, so one did not feel crowded, and something we had to get used to, recalling our eating arrangements aboard our ship. The mess hall was exclusively for enlisted men and non-coms. The officer-patient mess hall was situated in a separate wing on the second floor. After dinner, I walked to a large recreation room in a separate building, a short distance from the mess hall. Upon our arrival was a new type taker field jacket, which I was wearing. We had to be in uniform of the day while outside of a war. MPs patrolling the region would stop anyone outside a uniform and politely inform them of a uniform infraction, one sufficient to abide their direction. These were all minor issues considering where we had come from. So as long as you're in Paris, it was required that you wore the full military uniform.
Yeah.
Okay, that's understandable. I took a large easy chair in the corner of the rec room and I listened to music on a jukebox. They were playing Miller music. As I listened to the music, I kept on thinking of Renee and wondered if she had been at the park tomorrow. We'll be at the park tomorrow. I envisioned in my mind, and all I could see was a beautiful, charming woman. I would guess her age and somewhat a little bit older than I, perhaps 23 to 25. But you could not always judge these French women. They always looked younger than they actually were. I thought of writing some letters, but the thought better of it. Besides, I thought I was not going to write to Anne and Jean. I could write to Mother and Sally, but what was I going to say? Whine about my aches and pains like a babbling old woman? Furthermore, the Army censors turned me off, and they read everything. So every letter you sent, the censors would cross out the words they didn't think were acceptable. Was those called V-mails?
That was V-mail, yeah.
V-mails, right?
It was regular mail, but it got to EPO's post office before they went over to Stacy. They reduced down the V-mail so they could take more mail.
And was there many of your words crossed out, generally speaking?
What?
Of your letters was being censored, was many of your sentences or words being crossed out?
No, they told us now, if you write it and you don't give away your situation, don't give away where you are, just keep it regular. Just keep it
So you could not tell your mother or Sally that you're in Paris.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that, right?
Well, I could tell them I'm in Paris, but I couldn't tell them exactly where I was.
How many V-mails do you think you sent?
I said 150, and Sally threw them all out, remember?
Do you think there's a chance we can recover
Huh?
them? Maybe her kids have the V-mails? Do you think maybe her kids have the V-mails?
The kids were 4 years old. Come on.
They're old now.
Yeah, well, I mean, now I'm talking about the war.
So let me try to understand this. You would write a letter, and then the letter would go to the area that processes the mail, and they convert that letter, after being censored, into a V-mail. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
So your mother never got the actual letter. They got a version of a V-mail.
V-mail, yeah.
Okay. I didn't understand that. Now I do. Thank you. I thought of writing some letters, but thought better of it. I sat there and listened to the music and thought about Renee. I wonder if I could ever see her again. Some of the patients were playing pool, while others were playing cards. But most were like me, just sitting around enjoying the warmth and music, wondering when it would all end and when we'd be back to our old outfits. Lights out at 2100 hours. And I just had enough time for Coke and US Marble. And then I walked back to my ward to get ready for bed, and the inevitable penicillin injection. The nurse came around at lights out and asked how we're doing, took our temperature, and then gave us our injections. We cheerfully said goodnight and asked if we desired a sleeping pill, and then stated that she would be back in several hours for our shots. I had gotten used to the ordeal of shot taking, and it seemed that I'd taken them forever. How about the sleeping pill? Did you order a sleeping pill?
No.
Never took one?
No.
Okay. I didn't think you did. So you basically never had a sleeping pill in your life?
Do I?
You never had a sleeping pill in your life, right?
No.
Good. The morning after breakfast, we looked over the medical staff, and the appropriate results were recorded on our diagnostic charts at the foot of the beds. We were taken to physical therapy, which was a great deal cruder than the way it's practiced today. A large husky male orderly would give us 20 minutes of standing, sitting, calisthenics, followed by the individual body movements. In my case, my arms and legs. After that, we would cool down by walking around the gym 6 laps. After a 10-minute break, it was then to the various classes and movies on such subjects as current events, war film footage, propaganda films, fifth column activities, VD, and sights to see in Paris. Then it was back to the wards and our shots and preparing for lunch. After lunch, we were free until 1700 hours to do whatever we desired. I went to the orderly room for a sign-out pass and was greeted by a cheerful, pretty second lieutenant. I thought of a T5 Eckerd and my experience with him when I came to the orderly room for my pass at Breckenridge. The lieutenant signed me out and gave me some sightseeing literature and $25 in French francs. So, when you were going to go on outside of the hospital, the orderly gave you a pass to leave, and then she gave you some maps of places to see, and then she gave you $25 in Paris money, French money.
Yeah, well, we didn't have any money.
I understand. Did you understand the money system there?
After a while, you had someone that knows it pretty good, so that we relied on them.
French francs, a loan for my back pay due me. She suggested I take my overseas cap, as the MPs would stop me from being out of uniform. Oh, okay. So they give you $25 in French francs.
Yeah.
But that was to come out of your pay. It wasn't a gift.
Yeah.
You said it would, yeah, okay. So a loan from my back pay due me. So they're not gonna give you a gift, they're gonna take it out of your pay.
Well,
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to understand that. I reached the bench where Renee and I talked yesterday, but there was no one around, not even the boys sailing their boats in the lake. I sat there disappointed in not finding Renee here and wondering what to do next. Several hours of filling the time until 1700 hours. Another sightseeing tour did not really appeal to me, and I did not want to go back to the hospital for the rest of the day. I sat there for a while dejected and not seeing Renee when I suddenly got a whiff of fragrance. A whiff of fragrance. I turned around and there was Renee smiling an enticing, alluring smile. She stood there, her left knee bent slightly and her other foot pointed inward, which accentuated her sensuous ankles. As I gazed at her, I was delighted and pleased at what I saw. Renee was wearing a rather short-length skirt, several inches above her knee, which displayed her beautiful legs in all their splendor. She was wearing nylons and I questioned that, but said nothing. I found her high-heeled pumps sensually attractive. They gave her the light short jacket of sophistication I found so attractive. She had a cheap black short jacket that hugged her tiny waistline, and her head she was wearing on was one of those charming French berets, tilted at a sexy angle. She was wearing more makeup than yesterday, but not to an extreme. In a word, she looked beautiful. I expressed my delightful in seeing her once again, and especially the way she looked. She understood me and blushed slightly and smiled. As we stood there, I suggested that we walk a bit, and when she came close to me, I took her hand. It was warm and soft, and I ran my fingers across hers, feeling the slenderness, the touch of her fingertips sent a tingle throughout my body. As we walked, we talked, and I received much pleasure observing her face and mouth as she expressed herself. Her lips would form in a delightful, sensuous manifestation, and she would mouth her thoughts so that I could understand them. We would bump one another as we walked, and I could feel the softness and the warmth of her body. To be near her was a delightful and pleasant experience. We got into the business section of town, nearest the park, and I saw a little outdoor cafe. I pointed to Renee and nodded in agreement. We sat there in the warmth of the sun, drinking coffee and munching on some pastry. Renee sat there with her legs crossed, and they were a joy to behold and glimpse at occasionally. I was enjoying myself, and for the first time being in the hospital. I did not think of the war, of going back, or the future. What mattered was being here with Renee and looking at her beauty and savoring this time together. I felt relaxed with her. There was something about her which defied description that made you feel good to be in her company. Her language barrier was not the slightest handicap. I believe we communicated very well, and I thought we understood one another explicitly. We left the cafe and the window shop, the various small boutiques and craft stores along the winding cobblestone streets. Were most of the streets in Paris cobblestone at that time?
oh yeah, they had no tar. They had no tar. Asphalt, no.
Was there still many horses on the road?
Horses. That's all it was. Yeah, and the lanes were wide, narrower because the horse, the carriage was narrower. Not only they got the trucks that they had to come with the big 6x6s, they could maneuver there.
Couldn't make it.